And welcome on into the Third Round Reversal Fantasy Football Podcast. Brett Malamud here with you, along with Zach Malamud. Zach, football is back. Football is here. We are 2 games into the NFL season, and excited to join you this Saturday and recap some of these games that happened over the last couple nights and preview Week 1.
Yeah, Brett. I mean, it's crazy that we've had football the last couple of days, and couple of days that we've been thinking about for a long time, you and I, and it's finally here. And it definitely did not disappoint those first couple of games. So let's get right into it.
Yeah, so let's jump right into our game. We start out with the first game of the year, the Chiefs playing against the Ravens. Chiefs take it 27-20. Zach, a couple notable things I took out of this. Let's start out with the Chiefs side of things. Xavier Worthy, ton of points, gets 20.8 fantasy points. And, it was right from the jump where we saw him get the ball from the backfield, rushing touchdown, and we saw that speed on point there. Then he gets one through the air on a miscommunication down the sideline. I think this is going to be one of those where Worthy is going to be really good. I also think that, the fact that Hollywood Brown wasn't in the lineup really speaks volumes here.
Yeah, Brett, and it was very funny. I was talking to a couple of buddies, and I said, yeah, I didn't start Xavier Worthy this week. I was just, I was kind of feeling it out. And they were like, why didn't you do that? I was like, well, when you really look at it, the efficiency that Xavier Worthy had on Thursday night was, unlike most players in the NFL, literally had 3 touches of the ball and 2 touchdowns and just sprinted downfield for most of them. 66 total or 68 total yards, Brett, and 3 touches and 2 touchdowns. Who expects that? It kind of it puts Xavier's name definitely on the radar. Just because now he's kind of an option in a lineup. But I feel like the one thing about Worthy would be if he's only getting that many targets, it's not always going to be 68 total yards on 3 touches. It's not going to work like that. Defenses are going to figure him out a little bit and try and find ways to stop him. I don't know how it's going to be possible for them to stop him, but it's not going to be 3 catches, 68 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That's just not going to work like that. So for that reason, I would say he's still in that boomer bust range until I see a more consistent target share from him.
Yeah, I think that for me, I think it was Jay Croucher who said it on Matthew Berry's Fantasy Football Happy Hour over on NBC Sports. Trade him. I think the value right now is just so high on Xavier Worthy. He didn't have Hollywood Brown in there with him. It was only 3 targets, and the output, and obviously, now it's Saturday, and we've only had 2 NFL games here in the entire season. That's the talk right now. Xavier Worthy is the talk of the NFL, strictly because, listen, nothing else happened. And so, yeah, I think the value is ridiculously high right now on him. And so, yes, jokingly, tongue-in-cheek, trade him just because the value is so high. One thing I do want to talk about is Patrick Mahomes. He did look really, really good just from the quarterback, the NFL side. Was a little more disappointing was the fantasy football output. I'm not sure that this is going to be a huge issue. I just think, the fact that Travis Kelce was being doubled pretty much the entire game. Hollywood Brown not in there as well. So it was sort of him to rely on Rashee Rice. And obviously Xavier Worthy had a couple big plays. Pacheco, they started to get him into it. I think that it'll be a better output, but as far as the quarterback NFL side of things, Mahomes is good.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't really, I feel like, look at this matchup. It's one of the tougher matchups in the NFL, and you can't, I don't think, judge Patrick Mahomes fantasy-wise on this kind of matchup. We're going to see the next couple of weeks how it's really going, and that'll be the time to really judge. But, opening night, he's at home, yes, but Baltimore's defense is one of the best in the NFL for a reason. And I feel like, yes, Mahomes' output was not as great as owners wanted it to be, but I would definitely not worry just yet. He's still got plenty of time and plenty of good matchups to come.
Okay, so let's talk Ravens here because I think that, we sort of saw what was coming in. We talked some of our other episodes about the addition of Derrick Henry. Make sure you go check out those episodes, by the way. Subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast, and give us the thumbs up. But I think having Derrick Henry in there, it was notable pretty early on that they were going to lean into him, especially when they're within the 10-yard line. We saw an early touchdown, scored the first touchdown of the year, Derrick Henry, and Lamar looked like Lamar. And that, I think, was, a refreshing thing to see. He looked actually slimmer than he did come last year. And so you have that little worry about, okay, well, he's slimmer and he's taking some big hits because he did. He took a ton of big hits. But the output was really good. I think that defenses are now going to have to almost guess, okay, well, who's going to run the ball? We sort of saw that coming between Henry and Jackson.
Yeah, I mean, Brett, when you look at it, I would say, all right, it kind of tells you what the game plan was from the Ravens. They wanted to start out, get Henry involved, and really, I mean, all the hype has been about this backfield, and they started off pretty well. But then you saw as the game went on that they really started to go away from Derrick Henry and kind of completely took him out of the game. I think he had 3 carries in the second half, Brett, maybe even less than that. Like, he was just non-existent in the second half. And yes, that had a little bit to do with the Ravens losing and the Chiefs putting up points. But I mean, when we looked at this backfield, we said, all right, this offense is completely, or most of the time, going to run through these 2 guys. And I feel like if the Ravens want to be one of those top teams really in football, I do think that Henry needs to be involved almost all the time, rather than some of the time and oh, well, we'll get Justice Hill in there for the passing game. I don't think that's a good game plan from the Ravens because I feel like it puts a lot more pressure on your quarterback. And although Lamar played pretty well, I mean, some people will talk about the throws at the end of the game. He had a great game. He definitely did. But he didn't need to have so much because he has now, I mean, one of the best running backs in the league in his backfield. So I would say if you're a Henry owner, I wouldn't worry because I don't think this is that big a deal. It's only week 1. But I do think the Ravens need to get Henry more involved in this offense because 13 carries to 16 for Lamar is just not smart in the end.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think that they sort of lean into Lamar running quite a bit more than I thought they would, where it was sort of working with Henry. And, a lot of carries, obviously. You talk about, yards per carry. But at the same time, I think that, he's a reliable guy. And, yeah, they don't want to run him into the ground like the way that it sometimes felt when he was over in the Titans. And obviously he battled some injuries and stuff, so they are being a little delicate. But at the same time, I don't think that it's worth throwing Lamar Jackson into that risk as well, especially as I said, with that thinner frame and taking some of those bigger hits. Let's talk about this big story here in the Ravens, and it goes to the tight end position. Mark Andrews, 2 targets, gets 2 catches for 14 yards. Isaiah Likely, 9 of his 12 targets caught, 111 yards and a touchdown. We talk about that last play of the game where he looked like he was in, and then upon further review, he wasn't in. That toe didn't really get in bounds. But that's minor semantics. Isaiah Likely looked like the guy we thought he was last preseason, just in week 1. What are your thoughts though on him moving forward? And is this a changing of the guard like we're seeing out there, in the Twitter sphere? Or is this really just hey, both guys are going to have impact?
So, yeah, I think when you really look at it, and the difference is big in this game, obviously 26.1 fantasy points for Likely in standard PPR and Andrews with 3.4. Like, it's night and day there between these two guys, and Andrews with only 2 targets, Likely with 12. What I take from this, though, Brett, is obviously Mark Andrews was in a car accident during the preseason, and that definitely took him out of practice for a fair amount of time. Now, we're also looking at Mark Andrews, who last year dealt with injuries, and Isaiah Likely came in and was the number 1 tight end. Now you look at this year, and like I said, that car accident in the preseason, Likely was getting the number 1 reps. He was getting every rep with Lamar Jackson in the first team because Andrews was not on the field. I do think when you look at it, everybody's like, oh, Andrews is done. Andrews is done. No. I think Andrews is still there. However, we could say now, Brett, that there may be a 2 tight end type of offense for Baltimore, where can both of them finish in the top 10 of fantasy? Maybe. I think that's possible. I think they're both going to get their targets, and Likely got a lot of the check down plays, except for that long one where they threw it deep, and he somehow in that crazy play goes all the way down. Most of them were just simple check downs, and Likely was the guy right there for Lamar. I would say if you're an Andrews owner like myself, do not panic. I think he will get his targets definitely. When you look at this kind of game script, it was all passing, and they had Andrews out basically as a wide receiver, Brett. Likely was in the tight end position, and Andrews looked like a third receiver out there, or even a second next to Zay Flowers. So I think the big thing is don't panic if you're an Andrews owner, but we could see Isaiah Likely's stock really jump up. And yes, he could finish in the top 15, top 10 of fantasy tight ends this year. It's entirely possible because that's how this Baltimore offense works.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of people are overreacting right now as far as the split. I think that it has to do with the fact that obviously week 1, and we talk week 1 overreactions, and every year it's sort of the same name of the game where it's like guys who coming into the season have one sort of value, and then like the Tuesday after week 1, you see like the most skewed values because everybody has the smallest sample size, and they sort of overreact based off of what happened week 1. Always every year, I think it's led to some big trades in some of our leagues that we've had, where you're like, what are you thinking about here? It happens every year. It just does. You see that rush to the waiver wire. I think that Isaiah Likely being rostered in only like 18% of leagues and stuff, like that's going to be one of those guys that everybody rushes to the waiver wire. I mean, will he have an impact this year? Yeah. But also, like you said, like there was a car accident. I think Andrews is going to be, ramped up in the next couple weeks more than he was obviously for now. And yeah, I think he was sort of on a pitch count a little bit. Obviously, Likely was the hot hand. It didn't look like the receivers were doing much. And so, yeah, I think that there will be a role for both of them in this offense. I think that Likely saw a lot of the 11 personnel later in the game, and it strictly was based on pitch count, hot hand, and that's kind of how they did it. But yeah, Andrews is going to have a role. Andrews right now is probably the biggest buy low out there. And, I think that if you could take advantage of a panicky Andrews owner, it could potentially work out for you.
Yeah, 100% agree.
All right, so let's jump right to the following game that happened last night. Eagles-Packers. Zach, I mean, let's start with the Eagles, and then we'll get to the speculation about what's going on with the Packers. Jalen Hurts has a new friend, a new best friend in Saquon Barkley. This dude is a stud. We knew he would be a stud. We talked about whether the tush push would be a thing. That stayed. I think that there can be a world where the tush push is still successful. We saw a couple times where, the new center there didn't exactly hand the ball off the right way. We saw a fumble that Saquon had to dive on at the end of the game. But I think that this run game really is through one. However, I think Jalen Hurts still has the chance to be able to make up some points on his feet.
Yeah, Brett. I mean, it when you look at it, this offense is just so powerful. They have so many guys that they can go to, and always a big question about the Eagles was, all right, well, the running back is a bit of a weakness for them compared to their wide receivers and the tight end and obviously the quarterback. So they get Saquon Barkley, and this is exactly what the Eagles really wanted. They also took advantage of one of the worst run defenses in the NFL in Green Bay, and they did a great job of it. 24 carries, 109 yards, 2 touchdowns for Saquon Barkley. Hurts had 13 carries for 33 yards. Obviously, they'll want that to be a little bit higher, but now Jalen Hurts realizes that he has a guy right next to him, similar to a Lamar Jackson with Derrick Henry. Yeah, Jalen Hurts has Saquon Barkley, and he will hand the ball off to him whenever he gets the chance. Like that's a big thing in this offense now, and I feel like it just runs through most of the time through Saquon Barkley. Like how is Saquon running today? All right, well, keep giving him the ball, and because they gave it to him in the right moments, that's what led to, I feel like, the other guys getting wide open, clear as day. And obviously the big one to A.J. Brown gets the big touchdown for the Eagles. But they were kind of in a game where it was just going back and forth between the offenses. And then you saw them just give the ball to Saquon Barkley and let him kind of take them to the promised land. I mean, he was perfect yesterday in every single facet, rushing, receiving. He really is a huge part of this team this year, and could be a reason that brings the Eagles over the top. Definitely.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, listen, Hurts had a couple turnovers and kind of settled himself into it. And yeah, they're going to really lean through into Saquon to kind of get this offense moving. And it almost sort of reminds me of what happened in almost like Detroit, I would say, where they kind of go run, and then all of a sudden there's a play action and AJ Brown's wide open down the field, 67 yards to the house. That one had me screaming at my TV. I wasn't singing "Fly Eagles Fly." I was afraid my future brother-in-law will show up at my doorstep, but the Packer fan. But yeah, AJ Brown, huge touchdown there. I think found himself wide open quite a bit over the middle. Using him in the slot, I think, was very good. And, listen, Jahan Dotson was there too. Only got one target, didn't catch it. But I think that, slow and steady with him as well. For those Dotson dynasty owners, like patience. Wouldn't just go out and drop him. Johnny Wilson also had a little bit of a role. But, I think that as far as Dallas Goedert goes, I think we're starting to see the downturn. There's just too many mouths to feed, and it's kind of going to become where Dallas Goedert's one of those back-end tight end ones, almost even a tight end two. And that's sort of something that I just noticed as a Dallas Goedert owner. And so something to kind of keep my eyes on there as we move forward. But yeah, this offense is freaking awesome. Just it is. It's a really, really good offense. I think that they'll be able to make some noise. And obviously, one of my favorite plays of the entire evening wasn't even that. It was Kenneth Gainwell. Kenneth Gainwell caught the 10-yard catch and made 3 guys miss. And that was crazy. That was a good play. I think that they'll be able to lean into Gainwell when Saquon sort of needs that rest. And so potentially into him a little bit more than just one catch. All right, let's jump into the Packers because, Zach, there were a lot of the mouths that were needed to be fed. Jayden Reed obviously is the number one guy. He gets 4 of his 6 targets, 33-yard touchdown. He had 138 yards. This guy is going to be the guy. I think that became pretty clear. And we talked at the beginning of the season about how there's so many guys that it's really tough to figure out who to draft in this offense. Listen, Christian Watson caught a touchdown, Dobbs almost had one there. He had 7 targets, though. Dontavian Wicks, he didn't get any of his 3 targets, but I think that, what we said at the beginning, if you have Reed, that's great. If you have any of the other guys, it becomes a little shakier as far as starting them outside of, obviously, Josh Jacobs.
Yeah, I mean, this game really proved to us that Jayden Reed is the number one. I mean, that was kind of the question all offseason. It was like, oh, well, they got 4 guys, but who's the top guy? Who's going to get the most looks? And I mean, if you watch this game, you said, oh man, I probably should have drafted Jayden Reed. I mean, that's exactly what I did. I think when you look at him in space, he's just ridiculous. And just every time he got the ball, it was like, all right, something's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen. Kind of like a worthy type of player where just he gets the ball in his hands, he's gone. Obviously not as fast as Worthy, but just the impact is huge from a guy like Jayden Reed, and obviously showed it last night. And just 33 fantasy points is, I mean, that's a game winner each week for some people. So definitely a guy that if you have him, he's clearly like a flex. In deeper leagues, he's going to be your wide receiver too. Like, and just put him in your lineup every week. Because even though, yes, we'll talk about the injury in just a second. Even though that will happen, Jayden Reed will still get all of those looks because he has that rushing ability in the backfield and that kind of trick play, kind of just breakout speed when he gets a handoff in the backfield. I think that is huge for Jayden Reed, which he has over every single one of those wide receivers. He has that ability in the backfield versus a Christian Watson who, yeah, you're going to really focus on a catch and a Dobbs and even the tight ends as well, Brett.
Okay, let's get to the big guy here. And it was Jordan Love, who obviously looked really good early on, threw a pick that didn't look so good. And then, sort of settled himself down. It looks like he's going to go lead them to this game-winning Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady-like drive. Packer fans have come to know that world. And then he kind of gets rolled up on underneath. Upon review, it looked like his knee had a little bit of a pop in it. I saw that video this morning. So, all the best to Jordan Love. And hopefully it's not that bad. They ruled out an ankle injury, though, and it looked like knee. And again, I watched the video this morning. It didn't look great. Don't want to speculate about MCL, ACL, because that's sort of the end-all, be-all. But if this team can't go forward with Jordan Love, how does that affect the value? And obviously, if you did pick Jordan Love, you picked him probably, you waited on quarterback. So what is your strategy now, only 1 week into the season, if you are a Jordan Love owner?
Yeah, well, I think the big thing is obviously you wait and see. That's the number one. They're flying back to Green Bay, and you're going to see what the injury is and kind of how long it's going to be. Because I mean, we do expect that he's going to miss a little bit of time. Even if it's just a week or two, he's going to miss time. That injury was very gruesome and nasty to watch. So I think when you look at Jordan Love, it's you probably drafted a good backup quarterback, or just one of those higher tier backup quarterbacks. If you waited and you drafted Love, you probably said, all right, I'm going to back myself up with just somebody kind of close behind him and see where that goes. If you didn't, I would look to maybe trade for one, because I'm sure there's a team that said, oh, all right, I got one of the top quarterbacks. Oh, that guy's still there. I know you did it in our league. Yeah. It was a Mahomes, sure. And then you were like, wait, Dak Prescott's still there? Okay, great. So that kind of situation, I feel like, is something to look at for most league owners. So I would look at that. In terms of this offense, I would say a lot of the pass catchers, we always put them in flex consideration anyways, and it was kind of a question mark if you should put them in. I think they're just still there. I think that's the kind of case where you weren't really starting them, I don't think, unless it was a deeper league. So yeah, if he's out, you're not going to start them if Malik Willis is playing quarterback. However, the other guys, Jaden Reed, Josh Jacobs, that's going to be this offense. It's going to run through those two guys. Jaden Reed's going to get those touches out of the backfield and kind of the short screen type of plays and just bolt down the sideline. Josh Jacobs is going to get those check downs, as well as obviously the runs in the backfield. And I would say a little bit of the tight ends. However, it's so hard to judge in this Green Bay offense which tight end is going to be good one day. Everybody's like, oh, well, Musgrave is going to be great. The Eagles' secondary is not good. And then Kraft got 2 catches for 37 yards. So it's just kind of hard to tell. But I do think this offense runs through Reed and Jacobs if Love misses time.
Totally agree. Let's move right into our Sunday matchups here. And we start out in Buffalo, Arizona Cardinals heading into Buffalo. And Zach, I think this is going to be a pretty big game for the Bills guys. I think that obviously we talk about Keon Coleman, we talk about Curtis Samuel, Khalil Shakir. I'm being a little bit more patient on those guys. Where I think I'm going to up the value is at the running game. I think that James Cook is going to have a huge game in this one. I think Dalton Kincaid's going to end up being that safety valve as well. I think they're going to play a lot of the short game for Josh Allen, kind of let those receivers get comfortable in the offense and not take a ton of deep shots, kind of play slow and steady here. So obviously you're starting Josh Allen. I'm taking James Cook as well as a very high-end RB2, low-end RB1, and Dalton Kincaid as well. I just think this is one of those games where the Cardinals, obviously, like they weren't that great last year. But I think that as far as the pace that they're going to take it at, the Cardinals had a pretty good secondary down the stretch. And so for me, I think that they're going to play slow and steady. Joe Brady kind of moving the ball a little bit with lesser pace for the Bills guys here.
Yeah, just quickly. I mean, we always say it in week 1. If you drafted a guy, you're gonna start them. You're gonna start if you drafted a guy in the first like 7 rounds, yeah, they're gonna be in your lineup. The main ones, of course, with Allen and Cook and Kincaid, you said it. Definitely there's some consideration for a guy like Keon Coleman just based on how great this matchup is. They're facing the worst secondary in football, in my opinion. And their stats don't lie there. Arizona's defense in the secondary is woeful. So I think Josh Allen has a big day here. He's going to go to his top targets. I would not be starting Keon Coleman, but I definitely think he has flex consideration if you're in a deeper league and say, all right, I'm going to take a shot on this guy based on matchup. And quickly, Brett, for the Cardinals, you got your main guys, of course, already there in Kyler with James Conner, as well as the pass catchers in McBride and Marvin Harrison. I think the big thing I want to see is all right, Marv's here. Let's see it. Him and Kyler. How good is it going to be week 1? A lot of people drafted Marvin mid-second round, maybe even high second round. So will it pay off? I think that's the big thing in this matchup that I'm excited to see. How's that chemistry going to go between, these two superstars in the NFL?
Yeah, for me, it's the same thing. And, I had obviously Trey McBride in there as well. I think that, back and forth, the Buffalo Bills linebacker situation is one to monitor here this week. And, obviously Matt Milano and his injury, I think that's going to have a big effect here on a, Trey McBride having a big day kind of a thing, where they line him up and whether they line him up in the slot versus, on the inside and what that looks like. I think we're going to see a lot of change of pace with that. And it could result in a pretty big day. I think the Bills are really going to hone in on Marvin Harrison. It didn't stop him in college where he was getting triple teams sometimes. We'll see what happens in the NFL and whether Kyler can make some magic happen here. But yeah, obviously you're starting him and target share is going to be pretty big for those two guys. And so that's where I have my eyes on. Let's jump right to the next one. New England at Cincinnati. Zach, No Drake May to start the season. It's Jacoby Brissett. What does that mean as far as Ramondre Stevenson's value and maybe some of those other receivers there?
Yeah, I mean for this week you're just starting Ramondre because number one, on the road, number two, they got Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. And I mean the last option, there are so many weapons in this Patriots offense. I mean, how do you even pick between any of these guys? Your Jalen Polks, your Demario Douglas, your I mean Javon Baker. Like, there's so many guys. Even your Hunter Henry's at tight end. I mean, it's just hard to tell, Brett. So I would not be starting any of those receivers. I think you just start Ramondre as an RB2, maybe an RB3 this week. I do think the Bengals defense is gonna kind of hone in on this offense, and just on the road, it's gonna be kind of a I mean, the Patriots are in a rebuild right now, so they're trying to figure things out. Of course, the new coach, Gerard Mayo, is his first game here. So, yeah, I think the Bengals just roll in this one, and I don't think it'll be frankly close.
Yeah, for Bengals guys, obviously, like, don't overthink this. And the Jamar Chase thing, if you picked him, you're playing him. Like, I've seen so much in the last couple of days about, like, well, he might be on a pitch count and all that. Don't overthink it. Don't be stupid. Put him in your lineup. One of the guys that I think might end up having a role, and I'll talk about him in a little bit, but Andre Yosevas. I think that, the fact that T. Higgins is not playing, Yosevas looks like he's going to be the number 3 receiver from the get-go when T. Higgins is there. For me, that means that with Chase in there, potentially on a pitch count, Yosevas could cook in this game. I think that there's a decent chance that he is one of those guys we're talking about next week with the Warriors. Again, I'll talk about him later on, but that's one that I have my eye on. And then Zach Moss. I think that he's going to immediately split the carries with Chase Brown. And so I'm kind of fading him a little bit this week, just being a little bit cautious. And, if you did pick him, like you picked him later on, but at the same time, I think that, if there is a chance that he loses out on carries to Chase Brown and they kind of do this 1-2 split type thing, like Tennessee, we were projecting, you could kind of be a little bit scared of that.
Yeah, definitely. I think when you look at this backfield, it's kind of hard to tell who to start really this week. I would say Moss is probably the safer play, but I can understand if somebody has Chase Brown and they just kind of don't have a choice. Yeah, you're relying on the more PPR type of output and seeing where that goes. But I feel like the safer play, like I said, is Zach Moss because of he's going to be, I feel like, the true running back and getting a lot of those carries in the backfield. So yeah, start your guys, and just a couple of guys on the flex radar, definitely with those injuries to Higgins, and just even the question marks right now in the backfield.
All right, let's jump right to our next match. Minnesota at the New York Giants. Zach, this is going to be one of those that I have my eye on this week one, and it really comes down to the Giants and what they do with Malik Nabers. I am a dynasty owner that has Daniel Jones, Malik Nabers, Theo Johnson, all on my team. And so, yes, going to keep my eyes on it, but it really just comes down to what's the target share now for Malik Nabers. We know that they're probably going to shadow him a little bit more, Minnesota, but it really comes down to the fact that I don't think there's much else there in the Giants. And yeah, we'll see Theo Johnson factor in. Yeah, we'll see Mondale Robinson was a potential guy that I was thinking for my ones to watch, just based on Malik Nabers getting double teamed a lot of this game. But I think Nabers is still going to get a ridiculous target share. For me, he's an absolute must-start flex guy, if not your wide receiver too, if you have him.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he went in about the 4th, maybe 5th round in most drafts. So yeah, he's going in your lineup. I think also on the other side, I'll bring it to is Justin Jefferson and seeing what's going to happen with him and Sam Darnold. I will say, if you're the Vikings and obviously the injuries happened and seeing this, I mean, your week 1 matchup really can't get much better than the Giants secondary, who was horrendous last year, brought back the same guys as last year, and are just going once again. So Justin Jefferson, I'm expecting like 8 for 120, Brett. I think this is going to be a monster game for him. Just feasting on this secondary, and of course, we talk about it when either quarterbacks get injured or you have a backup quarterback in. Where do they always go? Their top guy. I think that's the big thing this week with Jefferson. I also just quickly put some flex value on Jordan Addison, who a lot of people are like, oh, well, he's in the 30s and the 40s in a lot of rankings this week. I mean, this secondary is bad. So I think there's going to be a deep shot, and Jordan Addison a lot of the time is on the end of it.
Yeah, you literally read my mind, because I was going to say to you, as a Jordan Addison owner, are you starting him this week? But yeah, I mean, with the Giants, I agree with that. I think that, there's going to be some deep shots, and they're going to try to get Darnold comfortable. His offense, obviously, like, he's the starter this year, with the McCarthy injury. And so, yeah, leaning a little bit to Aaron Jones, who's finally healthy, knock on wood. And obviously, if you have Aaron Jones, you're putting him in your lineup. But yeah, this is going to be a Jefferson game, I think, and Addison will factor in on a couple of those deep shots like we saw with Kirk Cousins, where it was kind of like, hey, he's like 10 yards wide open. We might see a couple of those from Jordan Addison. All right, Zach, let's jump right into the next game here. Tennessee at Chicago, the NFL debut of one Caleb Williams. What do you see coming out of this? Playing obviously against Tennessee, a team that we're projecting to not do as well this year, but obviously a ton of weapons now for the Bears. So who are you putting in your lineup?
Yeah, this is a little interesting for me, Brett, because I actually, and I'll just quick example, one of my leagues drafted 4 receivers in the first 6 rounds or so, or first 7 rounds, and I had a really tough decision this week. It was Rashee Rice. I also have CeeDee Lamb. I also have Malik Neighbors, but I also have DJ Moore. The decision came down to Rashee Rice or DJ Moore, and I chose Rashee Rice. Thank God I did. That was a good decision so far. But I feel like when I look at this matchup for DJ Moore, L'Jarius Sneed is now in Tennessee, Brett, and one of the best lockdown corners last year in Kansas City. I don't think it's just going to be a complete shutdown, but I don't think it's going to be one of the best games we see from DJ Moore. I'm actually going to focus a little bit on the other guys, the Keenan Allens and the Rome Odunzes, who I feel like everywhere else in the secondary, they're going to start to feast. And I think that's a big thing heading into this matchup. Of course, the Bears also have Swift in the backfield, and they're going to rely on Caleb to do a lot, maybe with his legs and with his arm. But I do think this is a bit of a downgrade matchup for DJ Moore. And I could see Caleb really focusing on those other 2 guys in Allen and Odunze, just because they're going to be open. I think that's the big thing heading into this matchup.
Yeah, I'm actually, believe it or not, I think Odunze anytime touchdown might be a cool little bet there. I think that there will be some sort of highlight where we see it, and then everyone's like, oh, and there, you lose your mind kind of a thing. That said, I'm a little scared. I'm a little scared of starting any of those guys, just because we're unsure of what the pecking order is. Obviously, DJ Moore, you're putting him in your line, but it's really, Keenan Allen versus Odunze. Do you start them? Do you have better options? A lot of those guys dropped in the draft, or both of those guys dropped in the draft, and so you might have a team where you have better options at wide receiver, and it kind of becomes the numbers game. You can only start so many guys. And so if you want to be a little bit patient with those 2 guys, I can't fault you for it. Still taking the Dunze at the anytime touchdown. Swift, you're starting in your lineup as well. Where it gets a little murky for me is on the Titans side of the ball, where I think that, Pollard and Spears sort of dropped in the draft to a spot where I think that most teams have better running back options if you played your draft right. And so for me, it's really about the flex play potentially for either one of them. If you have them, I take Pollard over Spears just because I think follow the money. And they did give Pollard a nice contract. And so that's where I'm kind of going. Calvin Ridley, interesting flex option. DeAndre Hopkins, interesting flex option. Tyler Boyd, I'm staying away from for right now. Not starting a Okonkwo either. I think that, there's a lot of hype about him still. And for me, he's still a backup tight end, a tight end 2 probably.
Yeah, I agree with you. Just quickly on Tennessee, it's like, yeah, Ridley and you're figuring things out. Hopkins, it's still a question if he's going to play or not. I think it's looking more likely no. So obviously, just look at your lineup for that. But I feel like a lot of guys got drafted ahead of him. And it's really just a coin toss in that backfield because they both do the same thing. It's like, all right, well, hopefully just one goes off and the other one doesn't. I think that's kind of what you're hoping for, or just your guy that you put in your lineup falls into the end zone.
All right, let's jump to the next matchup. Carolina at New Orleans, 1:00 on Sunday. Zach, let's start out with the scene where it looks like it might be the Alvin Kamara show here early on. I think that, Carr, we saw the struggles, and I'm sure that they'll continue. But really, this is about trying to settle them into the offense. We'll see a lot of those dump off passes. Listen, as far as the Panthers and their struggles, I think it could potentially be a big day for Chris Olave. And I, cringe and cross my fingers and my toes when I say that, because we've seen that sort of matchup there for Chris Olave, and we've seen him not cash in on it in the last year or so. And so obviously, if you have Chris Olave, you're putting him in your lineup. But I think that this is one of those matchups that could potentially be a really big day. And also, we've seen it on the other side where Alvin Kamara kind of gets those points and those dump-offs, and it sort of just gets Olave out of there. Quick note on the Saints, Taysom Hill. Yahoo made a nice announcement, or I should say CBS Sports made a nice announcement that they are using him strictly as a tight end and not as a quarterback anymore. And so, interesting, and we'll see obviously if that sort of changes. Just wanted to make that notable, and what we're talking about. Obviously, if you're struggling Taysom Hill at quarterback, then you're kind of in a bad situation. But as far as superflex leagues and things like that, should be noted. I will say though that for me, I'm starting Olave, Kamara, and that's it. I don't know that I'm starting Derek Carr even in a superflex league. In that, I'm going to be a little bit more patient. You have one of those third quarterbacks in a superflex league, which highly recommend you go get a third quarterback if you're trying to compete this year in a superflex league. I'm not starting Carr this week. I think that this is sort of one of those trap games right at the jump here.
Yeah, I mean, interesting one here, Brett. I just think the top two guys are really your focus here in New Orleans. Kamara and Olave are going to be in your lineup, of course. I'm expecting a huge day from Kamara. One of the worst run defenses in football is Carolina. And I don't think they really did enough to kind of change that during the offseason. So this could be just Alvin Kamara going to town. And I feel like, yeah, anything after that is just kind of a guess. Rashid Shaheed is just a boom or bust kind of play. Just quickly on Carolina, it's going to be Deontay Johnson as a flex consideration for a lot of people this week, as he's the number one. There's some people that like Adam Thielen. I wouldn't start him because I think Deontay's going to get the volume. And I don't know if all of a sudden Thielen's just going to fall into the end zone. The other guy I'm looking at is as a flex consideration is Chuba Hubbard, who a lot of people drafted late round value, and he's the starting running back. So it definitely is a solid matchup for Hubbard. Of course, if you have your top guys, yeah, you're starting them. But I mean, if you have an opening at the flex spot, Chuba Hubbard is a real solid option because he's the number one running back.
Yeah, fair. And obviously, Jonathan Brooks was picked. I think that they're going to still lean into Chuba, obviously. Even when Brooks does come back, Brooks isn't there right now. And so I think that this is a time for Chuba to try to win his role for when Brooks comes back. I think that obviously Deontay Johnson and him being the number one there, that still holds true for me. I'm I'm thinking about putting him in the line this week just because I think there'll be a pretty good target share for him, even with the difficult matchup. He's got to go up against Paulson and Lattimore for pretty much that entire game. And it's obviously in New Orleans in the Dome. We talk about what that does for guys. But as far as Deontay goes, he's a flex consideration for me. Chuba as well. Let's jump right into the next matchup here. Pittsburgh at Atlanta. Zach, an interesting situation brewing in Pittsburgh of who the starting quarterback is going to be this week. And Russell Wilson right now battling some injury. We saw a lot of reports come out that it looks like Justin Fields could be the guy starting for the Steelers this week. What does that mean for the run game, especially where we know that Fields is one of those guys that can take off?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big one for Pittsburgh to have Fields if he is starting. I'm in a situation in our Superflex league where it's like, all right, yeah, he's back, but I don't know if I'm just throwing him into my lineup ahead of a Herbert or a Rodgers. I just think that even though there's the possibility, I feel like this game circles Pittsburgh and the run game. Just because Justin Fields is in the lineup. Yes, there could be some passing in there, but I don't think there's going to be a lot. I think it's going to be more, George Pickens gets some of targets, and that's kind of it. I think they're really going to focus on Najee, and obviously Jaylen Warren has been very vocal that he's perfectly fine. He's going to be back, and he's starting week 1. So, I mean, with those two there and Najee and Jaylen Warren, I think this is really focused on them. It's a question of starting both of them. I would say probably yes, because they are going to get each of their targets, and it's not like Atlanta's defense is really, really good. So it could be a good matchup for them. But I do think because Russ is out and it's Fields in, that the passing game is not going to be a lot. And you know that we love ourselves some Arthur Smith. So there's definitely going to be a lot of run in this offense.
Yeah, and obviously, we like Arthur Smith and what sort of quarterback runs we'll see out of that. We saw a lot of that with Desmond Ridder, where it was almost those quarterback draws. Talking Ridder versus Fields is night and day. And so if it is Fields that is in there and not Russell Wilson, I think that you sort of downgrade a guy like a Jaylen Warren who dealt with hamstring injury. It sort of kind of flew under the radar this week, but Warren did play limited in practice this week with the hamstring, and so potentially could be on a pitch count. I think that Najee will still be okay. He's a flex consideration for me. But if Fields is in there, I'm not starting Jaylen Warren this week. I think that if Russell Wilson is the quarterback, then all bets are off. I think that we'll see a Najee value here as a flex consideration. I think it might be a little bit higher. But as far as Jaylen Warren's value, that's sort of murky for me. Like that would become a flex consideration for me. I don't know that I would pull the trigger on him week 1. So a little bit scared there. Pat Freiermuth, probably not a start for me. Again, I think that it's one of those back end tight end 1, but more likely a tight end 2.
Yeah, 100%.
And then as far as the Falcons, let's just talk we talk about start your guys here. I think it holds true here this week. Bijan, London, Pitts, you're starting all those guys if you have them. Kirk Cousins is the interesting one for me. You're probably not starting him because you probably picked a quarterback ahead of him in redraft, dynasty, superflex, those things. It's a good matchup to be able to still play him this week. And so, I'm not faulting anybody if they start him in one of those sorts of leagues. But start your guys is my Falcons advice here.
Yeah, said it perfectly.
All right, let's jump over to Jacksonville at Miami. Battle for Florida. Zach, I think that this is one of those special odds that we're going to see in Miami. For me, again, it's start your guys. You're going to end up starting Achane. You're going to end up starting Waddle, Tyreek Hill. Where it kind of comes down to the question mark is Raheem Mostert. And do they lean into that? Are we going to see him fall into the end zone? I think that it's early enough in the season where if you keep him on the bench and sort of see what the role is, there's just a lot of mouths to feed there. You got Achane, you got Jalen Wright there as well. Not totally sure what Mostert's role is going to be other than that goal line back. And so I'm being a little bit more cautious on the Mostert side of things. But again, start your guys here.
Yeah, I think just the big thing on that is obviously start your guys in those three in Achane and the two receivers in Hill and Waddle. But Mostert, obviously you look at Miami and at home, and they kind of always come out strong, Brett. They're always really, really good. They're come out firing. So I think this is a good matchup for them. And in this kind of week, I'd say, all right, yeah, you could start a guy like Mostert, and I do think there's going to be a lot of touchdowns here because I do think they just have a good matchup. Their offense is going to be rolling. Tua is always good when it's nice out. So early September, they're going to be feeling good, the Dolphins. So I would start Mostert this week as maybe a flex guy, and even if you have him as an RB2, like just put him in your lineup because I do think it's a good matchup. On the other end, it gets a little questionable at the wide receiver position for me in Jacksonville. This Miami defense got a lot better in the offseason. That was one of the biggest things for the Dolphins, was just improving everything about their defense, and they have some stars on their defense in the secondary, their linebackers, even on the line. Like, it could be a tough day for a guy like Trevor Lawrence. Obviously, you're still starting ETN. He's probably your RB1. So yeah, definitely in your lineup, but the guys like a Brian Thomas or a Gabe Davis or even a Christian Kirk, I don't know how great this matchup is going to be. Yes, they may have to throw the ball because they're going to be down. The only guy I'd really feel comfortable just getting in my lineup, a little bit for Kirk, but Evan Ingram is clearly in your lineup as your tight end one.
Yeah, I agree. I think that as far as the values go, I'm putting Kirk in there this week. I just think that he sort of became the guy, and so because of that, I think to be able to have him in the lineup, I think it's one of those guys that's going to end up feasting a little bit. We did a little, the injury bug hit the back half of the back end, I should say, of the defense for Miami. And so, we might be able to see some value there. So I'm actually putting Kirk in my lineup over Raheem Mostert, just to kind of come full circle on here. Just based on the fact that I think there's more opportunity, more upside for them. And obviously my running backs, I should say, are Derrick Henry and Breece Hall. So he's not cracking that lineup. And so it kind of depends on where your strengths are and what your depth looks like on your team. If you drafted running back heavy, then you're not really looking at that. But yeah, I think that Kirk has the potential to do it. Evan Ingram, I think it'd be a big for him. I think there's going to be a massive target share for Evan Ingram. Kind of saw that a lot of games last year. I think that we'll see that again here. And then Warren, like you're still starting him, but he's probably a lower end quarterback one this week, I would say.
Yeah, 100%.
All right to the next matchup, the last of the 1 p.m. window. And Zach, this might be my favorite matchup, just based on the fact that we get to see these two electric quarterbacks go tail to tail here. Anthony Richardson, CJ Stroud. For me, obviously, you're starting both of them, and they're must starts. But this could be one of those really high scoring games. Let's start off with the Colts. You're starting your three guys there, and it's Pittman, it's Taylor, it's Richardson. I don't know that you're starting anybody else in there, but I think this is one of those games where early on we're going to see what this looks like. Anthony Richardson finally healthy. Didn't really have a ton of time with Taylor, that read option that they started to run a little bit. I think we're going to see them go back to that. And then Pittman, listen, I think that Pittman became a better player when Richardson left. And so I'm kind of excited to see what it looks like now with Richardson back in the lineup. and Pittman sort of gain that confidence and looks like this stud number one.
Yeah, 100%. And obviously those main guys, you're obviously putting in a lineup. I've seen some people say, "Oh, well, let me see what AD Mitchell could do." Just wait a week. I think wait a week and you see what the real target share is going to be in this offense. Not a great matchup against Houston's defense, kind of tough. So I think yes, Pittman is going to obviously be in your lineup. So we'll see how it goes, but yeah, you said it. This is going to be a high scoring game. I'm going to be watching the other side because I drafted almost all of them in my most recent redraft league. Of course, your main guys in Stroud, Mixon, even all the wide receivers. There's a question of Tank Dell, Brett, where a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, maybe he's the third option." I don't know. I think he's in a good enough range where you just put him in your lineup. I think what you saw last year between him and Stroud is just tells me more than, oh, well, Diggs is there now, so it's going to take a lot. Like, I still think Tank Dell has a real role in this offense, and he's going to get his targets. I think they just pass the ball a lot. They rely on Mixon to do the dirty stuff in the run game. And this offense is definitely going to run smoothly. I expect that to happen. So start all of your guys here. Probably not a guy like a Dalton Schultz. Maybe he's a low end tight end one. He may be the only one of like the weapons that I'd say, all right, maybe you stay away, but everybody else should be in your lineup.
Yeah, I agree. I think that high scoring game, all the guys kind of contribute. And so, yeah, I include Dell with that as well. Dell, Diggs, Collins, Mixon, Stroud. Start them all. Let's jump right to our next game here. Vegas and the Chargers. Zach, no Josh Jacobs. And I think that that's the big thing here, the Vegas Raiders. And for me, I think, as far as the Zamir White thing goes, like it's a pretty difficult matchup from the get-go, just based on the defensive front. That said, you're putting him in your lineup. You're being cautious a little bit, though, as far as the expectations goes with Zamir White. It's a scary front. It just is. And so I think that they're going to see Davante get a ton of work. They're going to see those two tight ends get a ton of work. And so you're starting Bowers. You're probably staying away from Mayer for the get-go. But Davante, Zamir, those are my starts. I'm not starting Gardner Minshew in the super flex. I think it's, that's a game I don't really want to play.
Yeah, 100% agree. And Bowers, kind of depending on what your tight ends look at, he could be your tight end 2, it could be your tight end 1 like me. So I'm rooting for Minshew Mania this week, Brett. Excited to see how that offense really runs with Gardner as the quarterback, and will it be similar to how Indy ran last year? And if it is, we're in for a really good year for owners of those weapons in Davante and Brock Bowers. Just quickly on the other end, it's a little bit difficult to tell in the wide receiver room because you're in more of a flex kind of range, and you don't really know how this offense is going to look with Herbert as the quarterback, and they're going to focus a lot on the run game, I feel like. Obviously, with Harbaugh as the head coach, McConkey's kind of a flex play. A guy like Josh Palmer is also a flex play, but I wouldn't be like opposed to just saying, all right, I'm going to trust another guy and just take a week off and see how this offense is really going to run and what the target share is going to be. Everybody's saying, oh, well, it's going to be all run. It's going to be all run. And even so, it's kind of difficult to tell who's going to be all run this week because you have J.K. Dobbins, you have Gus Edwards. Are they going to eat from each other? I do think Dobbins is actually the main guy, Brett. I think he's going to get more of just like the first downs. He's going. Whereas Gus Edwards, I would feel like is the goal line back and going to get a lot of touchdowns. He's still going to get work. But I just feel like this offense is too difficult to kind of tell, Brett. And I don't know how comfortable I feel starting any of these guys this week.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, we talked about the defensive front of the Chargers. Likewise, I think the defensive front of the Vegas Raiders is also pretty good. They brought in a couple big names in there. And so I think that we're not sure who's going to be in charge of the run. We're not sure who's going to be in charge of the passing game. We're not sure what Justin Herbert's role is even going to be. And so for me, I think I'm benching all of them this week, and I'm kind of playing the wait and see game.
Yeah, I mean, we see that with a lot of these teams in week one. It's kind of just, all right, let's see how this offense is really rolling, and then go from there.
Yeah. Let's jump right to the next game here. We travel to Seattle, where the Broncos will take the Seahawks. Zach, NFL debut for Bo Nix. I think that we're going to see, the McLaughlin and Javonte sort of game, though. I'm not starting any of these receivers here. I'm obviously not starting Bo Nix. Super flex, he's probably a lower end quarterback too. But for me, I think Javonte and McLaughlin are probably the only guys you can consider here.
Yeah, I would agree. I think just a little bit of flex consideration for Sutton for some teams that drafted him and he could be their wide receiver 3. Yeah, I think you're just kind of looking at it. Seattle's defense not perfect. So there could be some weaknesses in the secondary. But on the other side, it's really start your guys in DK Metcalf. You also got Kenneth Walker there. I feel like after that, some people will lean into Smith-Njigba. It could be a great year. I think he has better matchups a bit down the road, because I feel like when you look at this secondary, it definitely got better. DK is going to have a tough one against Surtain. Yes, it could lead to some openings for Smith-Njigba, so some flex consideration on him.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, JSN could end up getting some targets just based on the fact that they're really going to shadow in on DK Metcalf. And so that's the only real sign I see there. Obviously, starting Kenneth Walker. But as far as the other guys, I'm staying away from all of them. Let's jump over to Dallas and Cleveland, though. And Zach, another potential, we don't know. Obviously, you're starting CeeDee Lamb, but are you keeping your expectations high, low? He's had a couple weeks. They've been very under the radar, though, as part of what the look is going to be, the output. We don't really know what's going on with the run game, so therefore I have to say CeeDee Lamb, top end, obviously. Jake Ferguson, I'm starting him as well.
Yeah, I mean, both of those guys. Yeah, Lamb and Ferguson. I wouldn't say my expectations are going to be like boom for CeeDee, but I think he's going to get his stuff. I think that's the big thing. The only guy that I really am just worried about, and I'm taking out the run game because I just don't know what's going to go on there. So I think there's better options. Is Dak Prescott, because this is the toughest matchup maybe in the NFL for quarterbacks in fantasy. And I don't think it's going to be a great day for a guy like Dak. This is the week where if you drafted a Jaden Daniels or a Caleb Williams behind him, I mean, they're going in your lineup. That's the kind of situation. It's just a really, really good defense. And on the road, I don't think it's going to be an easy day for Dak Prescott. So starting his weapons in Lamb and Ferguson, but I'm shying away from a guy like Dak.
And then on the other side of the ball, I think it's really start your guys here. Jerome Ford, obviously Nick Chubb not playing for the first 4 weeks. And so you're putting Ford right in there. He's going to get the heavy workload. You're putting Amari Cooper right in there. Same thing. David Njoku is probably a back end tight end one. And it depends really on where you drafted and whether you drafted 2 tight ends and what the setup is there. More likely than not, Njoku is in your lineup, though. Deshaun Watson's probably a super flex start for me. Even with the Cowboys defense, I just think, there's got to be some sort of something. It couldn't have gotten any worse, I would say, for Deshaun Watson last year. And so for me, super flex start there. But, somebody's got to eat besides Cooper. And so Jerry Jeudy, potentially a guy that you can stash, but I don't know that I'm putting him in my lineup this week.
Yeah, it's going to be a tough matchup for the wide receivers. They're obviously going to get shadowed. Well, Diggs is going to shadow Cooper, so it kind of downgrades Cooper just a tiny bit. With Bland out, it could be an option for Judy. I would not do it just yet. I think I'd wait and kind of see. But I do think it's a massive game from David Njoku because the Cowboys safeties is kind of the place where they struggle. And I think that's a big thing for this week is Njoku's going to get a lot of targets.
All right, let's jump to our next game. Is the last of the 4 o'clock window. This one at 4:25, Washington at Tampa Bay. Zach, let's start out with the Commanders. Jayden Daniels, his NFL debut. Ben Sinnott, his NFL debut. Luke McCaffrey, his NFL debut. Austin Eckler joins the Commanders offense. Curious to see what your thoughts are as far as Brian Robinson. For me, I think Daniels actually has a pretty good matchup this week. And again, we talked about it's where you drafted. If you drafted a lower end quarterback 1, and then you picked up Daniels just to kind of, have some sort of insurance, then you're probably considering him there. Super flex option, obviously, though. I would probably put him in that lower end quarterback 1 range. For me, I think that with Robinson, you're starting him, you're being a little cautious about it, though. It's like a low end running back 2 to flex range. You're being a little bit more cautious with who you're starting there, and it really depends on who else you picked at the running back position. You're starting Terry McLaurin. I don't think you can start the tight ends, though, and it really just comes down to patience, and we don't know whether Zach Ertz is going to have a big role in this. There's a lot of hype about Ben Sinnott, so that's sort of where my head's at. I'm staying away from both of them.
Yeah, just quickly, Daniels has a perfect matchup this week, and I mentioned if you have a Dak Prescott, pick Jayden Daniels over him in your lineup, and it's definitely going to pay off. He's going to work this Tampa Bay defense. As far as the running back, it's Brian Robinson. I wouldn't be really starting Eckler. I don't see it right now. At wide receiver, it's McLaurin and nobody else in terms of the pass catchers, whether it's tight end or any of the other receivers. On the other side, Brett, there's a lot of people that say, oh, well, it's week 1 and start your guys. If for some reason you drafted a quarterback late, Baker Mayfield has a phenomenal matchup this week because the Washington defense is abysmal. So for that reason, if you're saying, all right, I'm going to stream a quarterback, Baker Mayfield is top of the list, could have a top 10 week this week. And obviously all his weapons are healthy. They're all there. So it's going to be a good week, I feel like, for Tampa Bay. Of course, Rachaad White, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin, all in your lineup.
Yeah, agree. I think that, you're playing all of them. And I think that if you're one of those super flex leagues and you're between 2 guys, Baker Mayfield, very attractive option there. Let's jump right to the next matchup. Sunday Night Football, Zach. I'm excited actually for this one. I think it'll be a pretty good one. And we've seen these 2 teams kind of battle last year or so, Detroit and the Rams, Jared Goff. And then we talk about Matt Stafford and that storyline. Let's start out with the Rams. Again, this is a case of start your guys. I think you're starting Kyren, you're starting Puka, you're starting Cooper Kupp. Then it comes down to Matthew Stafford and the potential of him as a super flex option, but nothing more than that. I think that this is, again, case of start your guys.
Yeah, same, agreed. Kyren, Puka, and Kupp, and really Stafford as a super flex option. Other side is Goff as a super flex option. Actually, a good matchup for him this week against the Rams defense. And then, of course, your guys in Gibbs and Montgomery, St. Brown and Laporta. Should be a very exciting game. I'm expecting a lot of points here because these defenses kind of struggle.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you're going with those same guys. Seeing a lot of hype about Jameson Williams. I'll believe it when I see it. I think that be patient on that front. Let's jump to Monday Night Football. The return of Aaron Rodgers to California and to the NFL after the torn Achilles. Jets and Niners. Let's start out with the Jets. You're starting Breece Hall. You're starting Garrett Wilson. I don't know that you can start anybody else outside of that. I think it's a tough matchup for the Rodgers owners. I think it's a tough matchup even the Mike Williams, owners who grabbed him late. You probably have better options there. And yeah, there was a lot of hype about Tyler Conklin, but again, he's one of those bench passes for me. And so, that's where I'm going. I'm going with just really Garrett and Breece and staying away from the rest of them.
Yeah, and I think it goes kind of both ways. You're really staying away from the quarterbacks in these matchups. Purdy on the other side, just because both defenses are really good for that reason. I mean, they are really good against quarterbacks, and they kind of shut down offenses. But of course, starting those main guys, and a lot of them are at the top of rankings, and Breece and Garrett, as well as on the other end, you got McCaffrey, Debo, Ayuk, as well as George Kittle. And if you start your guys, then I don't think anybody after that is even in consideration with how tough these defenses are.
Yeah, agree on all fronts. I think that this, we've seen the Jets sort of break down some of these tight ends, and obviously Kittle could have a big game. And I think that could end up being the dark horse there for them. Brock Purdy, for me, consideration, but I think it's a tough matchup. And in a one quarterback league, you might have a better option. And so sort of just comes down to when did you draft and like that. Really a game where I think that they're going to try to lean a lot on McCaffrey and Kittle. And that's where I see it. Obviously, you're still playing Ayuk, you're still playing Debo, but I see the fantasy output really coming from McCaffrey and Kittle more than anybody else.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, Zach, we're back at it with our lock of the week. Excited to bring this segment back. These are guys that are in, our rankings as far as 20 or above, or 20 or below, I should say. You went with a familiar name here that you should start in a little bit of a crowded room. So curious to hear your take here.
Yeah, and it's exactly what I said. I look at this Bears offense and I say, well, they're going up against Tennessee, and L'Jarius Sneed on the other end is going to shadow DJ Moore. Like it's just going to happen the entire game, or for most of it. And now you got a rookie quarterback, and yes, he has another weapon in Rome Odunze, but why not go to one of the most secure pass catchers, a possession guy, and just settle you in Keenan Allen? And I mean, if he's in the top 30 right now in a lot of rankings, obviously he has a heel problem. He's questionable, but he practiced in full on Friday. Why not just take the possession guy? If Keenan Allen gets you 8 for 90 or 9 for 78, like I think it's just going to be in that range. He's going to get a lot of targets because DJ Moore is going to have a tough matchup. And why not? With their young quarterback, I think they'll be passing and getting Caleb moving around. So Keenan Allen, definitely a solid flex option here, and he's my lock of the week.
For me, I'm Malik Neighbors. I think it's a guy we've spoken at length about. Listen, he has Stephon Gilmore and Shaq Griffin right now as this week one matchup that he's got to go up against in Minnesota. But the dude's going to get fed. I think that the target share is going to be massive. We saw a 33% target share for him when he was in the preseason, a little bit of a smaller sample size, but I think that's sort of all we have to go on right now. I think there's not a lot out there. We talked about Wan'Dale Robinson a little bit ago, and I think that, he might have some sort of a role, Theo Johnson as well. But really, this is going to be Neighbors' offense, I think. And yes, people are going to be a little scared about the Daniel Jones and the quality of the targets, but I think Neighbors has proven that if you could throw it near him, he's going to go up and get it.
Yeah, 100%. He's going to come down with basically anything, as we saw that in preseason.
All right, so let's go to our ones to watch. These are guys that are owned in 50% or less in leagues. And Zach, I think that this segment for me has really been a fun one to do in the last season. And so excited to bring this one back as well. These are guys that are going to end up being a waiver target next week. And you picked a guy that we talked about just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, I'm going with Jerry Jeudy, who's owned in 45% of the leagues, and yes, that's a little bit high, but it's under 50, and I'm thinking, well, this week I just said it, Trevon Diggs is going to shadow Amari Cooper, and Deron Bland's out on the other end. So who does that leave open? That's Jerry Jeudy. So I think he's going into an offense where he's going to get targets. Like that's not a worry. It's more of, can he figure his things out? He had some drop problems and a lot of just, he was criticized a lot when he was in Denver. I think this is a big fresh start for him. And against those corners on the other end, I think Jerry Jeudy has a solid day and has some flex consideration, like I said. But I do think he's going to be a guy that people are like, wow, Jerry Jeudy is really good. He's the number 2. Let me pick him up next week.
For me, I'm taking Andre Iosivas. I think that it's a game where T. Higgins looks like he's not going to play. Chase might be on a pitch count. So, they talked about Iosivas, like I said earlier in the show. I think that there's the potential that we kind of, see this role kind of come to fruition here where he sort of solidifies himself as that number 3. And it allows ourselves to almost, he's not going to get fed like by any means. So I don't want that to be out there. But I think that a lot of people are going to get some points, pick them up on waivers, kind of stash them. And so you might want to get ahead of the curve here, especially because we don't know what's going to happen with Chase. We don't know what's going to happen, with that contract situation. He says he's close, but what's coming out of the player side and what's coming out of the team side is two different stories. I think that, the Higgins thing, and whether that injury lingers, comes back later in the season, might be a reason to dash this guy. So I'm taking Iosivas.
Yeah, definitely a good one and could have a nice solid target share this week with all the weapons being out. And it's a great matchup against New England.
All right, Zach. So we're ready for some football here. I think that, as far as the patience game, it's going to be a little bit hard to play after week 1 with such a small sample size. I think every year we sort of run into that overreaction Tuesday as far as week 1 goes. And guys, like I said at the top of the show, values have skewed in such a ridiculous way where you see a guy like a Likely being pegged as a top 3 tight end, and you see guys like a Mark Andrews being pegged as somebody who is and can be easily acquired. And so curious to see where those values go. Knock on wood, nobody gets injured, but obviously we run into that game as well. Somebody is bound to get injured, and what is the fantasy impact going to be like after only 1 week?
Yeah, I mean, a lot to talk about probably next week. And right now it's we have a great weekend of football, obviously 5 full days. And speaking of that, I'm going to go watch some college football right now. So excited about that and excited to talk next week.
Yeah, football season is back. Excited for all of it. Please subscribe to us on YouTube, wherever you get your talk. And in the words of Aaron Rodgers, the night is darkest before the dawn. We shall rise yet again. For Zach Malman, I'm Brett Malman. This has been the Third University Fantasy Football Podcast. Catch you on the next one.